Welcome to Hamburgers and Horror, the home of meat, monsters, and murderous good guy dolls. I'm Noah Hook, and today we're continuing our journey through the Chucky franchise with Child's Play 3. Chucky's third installment takes place 8 years after Chucky's demise in the good guy's factory. Chucky manages to come back again and hunts down a now 16-year-old Andy at a military academy. Child's Play 3 immediately went into production after the success of 2, and the ridiculously short deadline gave Mancini basically no time to come up with a decent script, and he also admittedly just ran out of ideas after the second one. He had come up with the idea to have multiple Chuckies this time, but the time frame and the budget really didn't allow for it, so it got scrapped. Jack Bender was brought on to direct, who is mostly a television director working on episodes of The Sopranos, Lost, and the saddest episode of Game of Thrones. David Kirshner and Robert Brown both returned as producers, and thankfully Brad Dourif returned to voice Chucky. This rushed film was released only 9 months after Child's Play 2, so Alex Vincent obviously could not play 16-year-old Andy. The role was given to 17-year-old Justin Whalen, who you may recognize from Serial Mom, Dungeons & Dragons, or Super Capers. So Child's Play 3 actually takes place in 1998, the same year that Bride came out. Child's Play 3 made a box office of $20 million, passing its $13 million budget and proving people will still come out to see a killer doll. But critics were even harder on Chucky this time around, calling Child's Play 3 mindless, perverse, and lacking the sharpness of the original. And that is generally the consensus, as Child's Play 3 has a 29 and 33 on Rotten Tomatoes, and it is Don Mancini's least favorite of the franchise, although he mostly blames himself for issues with the script. This was probably the Chucky film I had seen least recently, or at least remembered least, but I do at least recall a few fun moments, so why don't we just jump into it and see what our favorite good guy is up to. I hope your hair's a bit higher and tighter than mine, because we're looking at Child's Play 3. The movie begins back at the good guy's factory, which was shut down after the events of Child's Play 2. As workers clean up around Chucky's carcass, some big-ass claw picks up the rubber mess, releasing some of Chucky's blood in the process. The body is carried over that vat of rubber, and the rubber starts bubbling and Chucky is reborn. As the credits roll, we get a lot of cool, melty shots as Chucky is Frank Cottoned back to life. Enter the Good Guys board meeting where Mattson 2.0 is giving a presentation about the Andy Barclay incidents. Members debate whether it is wise to put the Good Guys back on the market after getting over 8 years of bad publicity, and CEO Mr. Sullivan decides it's time to bring them back as nobody remembers the story of Andy Barclay. The meeting ends and Mattson 2.0 gifts Sullivan with the first good guy off the assembly line. Gee, I wonder if it's Chucky. That night, Sullivan has his assistant take some work home on his way out and gets down to business checking on his stocks and testing out his putt-putt skills. As he prepares a drink, we see a certain somebody isn't in his box. Chucky quickly gets to work turning off the TV and hiding the remote under the couch. He trips the old man with some marbles and swarms him with an army of toys. He further messes with Sullivan by setting two good guys up to talk to each other. Chucky finally shows himself and smacks Sullivan with his golf club.
Don't fuck with the Chuck!
Chucky has come back to life after 8 long years, and his first words are, "Don't fuck with the Chuck." We have hit the peak Chucky one-liner movie. Chucky hits the fleeing Sullivan with a dart, taking him down again and maybe paralyzing his lower half. He darts his hand as well and chokes the CEO with a yo-yo, eventually strangling him to death. Chucky uses the magic of the internet to immediately locate Andy's location. Who's ready for a generic military school setting? A mullet-clad Andy is bussed into Kent Military Academy and meets with Colonel Cochran, the school's commandant. Cochran is hesitant to accept Andy given his history, but gives him a chance, although he tells him it's time to set aside childish things such as murderous dolls and deep-rooted trauma. It's time to get rid of that mullet and time to meet my favorite part of this movie, the school's insane barber Sergeant Botnick, played by Andrew Robinson from Hellraiser, and boy does he get off shaving boys. The original ad for the Good Guy doll plays on the TV and it puts Andy into a small state of shock, but this younger cadet named Tyler fucking loves it. Andy finds his room and his nerdy roommate Whitehurst is trapped in the closet. This prank was done by Shelton, a lieutenant colonel who isn't too nice to the cadets. Let's meet this film's secondary antagonist. Oh, that's a bit underwhelming. The actor does a fine job, but he just doesn't strike the fear the way Arlie Ermey does, you know? Scary or not, he quickly picks on Andy and Whitehurst, which De Silva, played by Perry Reeves from Entourage, isn't too happy about. Shelton has her give 25 push-ups while he rants about femininity and periods, but it's gonna take more than push-ups to stop De Silva from cracking jokes and giving Andy kiss-me eyes. Later, Andy is terrible at marksmanship and gets some up-close and personal tips from De Silva. We revisit that younger cadet Tyler, whose deployed father hasn't written. This older colonel knows the boy and cheers him up, and also has him run an errand by delivering this very specifically sized package to Andy. Tyler is a patriot and loves free labor, but when the boxes knock down a staircase and rips the packaging, Tyler goes AWOL. He unwraps the box in some kind of storage room, and Chucky wastes no time busting out and giving more one-liners. As Chucky is telling Tyler about Andy, he realizes that since he is in a new body, he is no longer tied to Andy and can swap bodies with whoever he first reveals his identity to. Really should have thought about that before you mailed yourself here, huh? So Chucky could theoretically become anyone, but he decides, sure, I'll steal this child's body, and introduces himself as Charles. Chucky starts playing hide the soul with Tyler and gets about as far as he usually does with the chance before being interrupted by Cochran and another commander. Cochran shames Tyler for playing with a doll and takes Chucky, who lets Tyler know he'll be back. The cadets are practicing drill team maneuvers when Andy sees Cochran carrying Chucky, again sending him into a state of shock. Shelton yells at Andy for dropping his rifle, and Major Ellis goes full metal jacket.
This is my rifle, this is my gun, this is for shooting, and this is for fun.
Cochran throws Chucky into a dumpster as a garbage truck is collecting it and starts screaming to be let out. The driver thinks it's a child inside and hops in the back to help, but Chucky's mean ass crawls out on his own and turns on the truck's compactor. The poor guy tries to escape, but inevitably gets crushed, dying by the hands of his own machines like many others in Chucky's way. The cadets hear the screams and find what's left of the garbage collector, again sending Andy into PTSD. As Whitehurst finishes polishing Shelton's shoes, we see Chucky has made it to Andy's room. He grabs Andy's knife and slashes his ankle from under the bed, but Andy never so much as limps after this, so I don't think he really cut anything. Chucky tells Andy he doesn't need him anymore, and Andy realizes he's talking about Tyler.
Yeah. Just think. Chucky's gonna be a bro.
Andy throws a shoe at Chucky and starts slamming him on the floor, just in time to look insane for Shelton. But Shelton is mostly pissed about his scuffed shoe and takes Chucky to give to his little sister for her birthday. That night, Andy sneaks into Shelton's room, knife drawn, but Chucky, now armed with a bigger knife, is one step ahead of him, and Shelton wakes up very grumpy. He doesn't seem to care about the knife in Andy's hand, but is sure pissed about the doll being gone. Andy denies taking the doll, so Shelton punishes the cadets to weed out the thief, making Andy very unpopular. Andy sneaks away from the punishment circle only to be caught by Shelton immediately. Chucky heads to Tyler's room only to find out that he is it in a game of hide and seek. Chucky begins his child hunt, but the oblivious Tyler keeps toying with him. Tyler, foregoing what was propped up to be a lifetime of respect for the military and its rules, sneaks into Colonel Cochran's office, and Chucky quickly finds him. Andy tells Whitehurst the doll is alive, and obviously Whitehurst doesn't believe him. Luckily for Tyler, De Silva and her friend are also sneaking into Cochran's office, so De Silva can look at Andy's file because she thinks he's cute. They hear a noise in the closet before they see anything too damning, which of course is Tyler and Chucky. De Silva decides to give Chucky a makeover, which super masculine Tyler isn't happy about. The three sneak out when they hear someone coming, leaving Chucky behind. Cochran finds Chucky and again throws him in the trash, so you know he's a dead man. Unfortunately for us and Chucky, the Colonel is so startled by the sight of Chucky he literally has a heart attack and dies, collapsing on his war figurines. The cadets have a moment of silence for Cochran as Botnick makes his rounds picking up victims, ordering Whitehurst to see him right after breakfast. Andy moves across the room to talk to Tyler, who hasn't seen Chucky since last night. Andy tells Tyler that Chucky is bad and dangerous, but stupid Tyler says he is good and Andy is just jealous he has a new best friend. But Andy gives him his knife just in case. Botnick berates Whitehurst and eventually finds Chucky hiding in one of his cabinets. This deranged man sees a lot of hair to be cut and sits Chucky down for a trim. He comes at Chucky with his clippers, but Chucky comes at him with a straight razor.
Presto. You're dead.
Botnick admires his well-kept mustache one last time before dropping dead in his barber chair. Whitehurst comes back for some reason and Chucky scares him away with a single boo. Despite 2 deaths yesterday, the Academy is going ahead with its scheduled war games. Shelton will lead the blue team against the red with the goal of capturing the other team's flag. They will be using paintball guns, but Chucky just so happens to be in the armory and is able to switch the red team's paintballs with actual bullets, which of course isn't possible, but fuck it, this is Child's Play 3. Oh, and for plot purposes, Whitehurst just keeps it to himself that the barber has been gruesomely murdered. The teams head out into the woods to begin their game, and Andy asks Whitehurst what he saw, but in true coward stereotype, he keeps his mouth shut. Andy gets bored with ghost stories, and he and De Silva sneak off into the woods together. She shows him this random-ass amusement park in the middle of the woods, I guess. The two make out while Chucky gets a doll boner watching. Andy has stolen Shelton's map and asks Whitehurst to help him save Tyler, but he is too scared to come along. Shelton quickly finds out Andy took the map and the blue team plans to attack red right now. Andy makes it to Tyler's tent where this other small child tells him he ran off with some man named Charles, and I guess didn't feel the need to tell anyone. As the blue team gets closer, De Silva is to take the right flank, leaving her by herself. Tyler and Chucky are wandering the woods and Sergeant Andy almost finds them, but Andy wanders by and Chucky wants to play hide the soul. Chucky is tired of this whiny kid calling him Charles and pulls his knife. Tyler's dumbass finally realizes the talking doll might not be such a good guy. Tyler may be dumb, but he is brave and stabs Chucky with Andy's knife. Tyler runs and calls for Andy, but he is a bit tied up with a pissed off blue team. Ellis calls for De Silva, but she's also a bit tied up with a pissed off Chucky. Tyler runs up on the blue team making a fine POW, cause nobody will listen to him or Andy. Maybe they'll listen when Chucky calls them by radio. No, they just think it's the red team and they have De Silva held hostage. Chucky tells them to meet him by the old Jeep, then tells the red team that's where they'll be. Also, he is holding De Silva hostage with a live grenade, which seems like the riskiest weapon to try that with. Shelton makes Andy and Tyler go ahead to draw out the enemy, and Chucky wants to make a trade. Andy is hesitant, but when Chucky pulls the pin from the grenade, Tyler heads over and De Silva joins Andy. The blue team rushes in and starts shooting at the Jeep, I guess. I don't know what the fuck they think they're hitting. Shelton calls a ceasefire and finally gets to meet Chucky. Just in time for the red team to rush in and shoot him right in the chest, killing him. Somehow the red team doesn't realize they are shooting live rounds and they keep firing for a while. But I think Shelton is the only one killed. Tyler crawls away from the chaos, and while everyone fights and argues, Chucky chucks the grenade at them. Whitehurst is the only one to see, and in a very cliche redemption, he jumps on top of the grenade, saving the others. Tyler runs to that random-ass carnival, and Andy and De Silva aren't far behind. Tyler finds a security guard who doesn't take him seriously, but is willing to call the Academy. He also knows what will cheer Tyler up, a good guy. I'm sorry, you mean to tell me Chucky ran all the way to this carnival and was located by the security guard and put in Lost and Found before anyone else made it there? Just on the off chance they would come this way? Andy and De Silva arrive and find the security tent, but the guard was shot with a gun in his desk and Tyler and Chucky are gone. Luckily, he had another gun on him that De Silva takes. Chucky decides that the Devil's Lair would add some ambiance to the ritual, but of course Andy and De Silva see them go in. We get some shots of this ridiculously extensive ride. Is this a permanent attraction or a pop-up carnival or what? Regardless, it's way too nice. Chucky gets knocked over by a skeleton and Tyler runs, but Chucky catches him. De Silva fires at Chucky, but his aim is better than in the original and he hits De Silva in the leg. She hands Andy the gun and he goes after Tyler. We enter the second section of this King's Dominion quality ride, which has a giant Grim Reaper and his giant scythe. Tyler gets stuck and Chucky is positioned perfectly to get two-faced by the giant scythe that is actually sharp for no realistic reason. Tyler hops on this devil butterfly thing up to the top of Mount Skull, but Chucky's hanging on as well. The thing somehow knocks Tyler out and Chucky begins the incantation as Andy climbs up. Oh look, a giant exposed fan. Huh. The storm clouds roll in and lightning strikes as Chucky chants. But Andy gets high enough to see Chucky and uses De Silva's advice to shoot Chucky once in the arm and again in the torso. Andy wakes up Tyler, but of course, Chucky isn't done yet. Tyler almost falls into the fan, but he hands Andy his knife, who is able to slash off Chucky's other hand, sending him down. He gets absolutely shredded by the preposterous fan, putting him down for good until Jennifer Tilly gets a hold of him. The movie ends with De Silva going to the hospital and Andy being taken by the police as the carnival shuts down. And that's Child's Play 3. It's a fine film. It's definitely the weakest out of the original three, and Chucky just isn't really scary in this one, and his constant jokes don't help. After the third time around, there just isn't much belief Chucky will succeed and take this child's body. The film is also so bogged down by the military school background. I don't care about the nerdy friend or the mean drill instructor. There's a ton of military movie references in Child's Play 3, but they mostly just remind me of better movies. The foster care system in Part 2 made sense, and I guess you could argue that this was a logical next step, but that's also a big jump, and I also just find it very unlikely that Karen is still locked up after 8 years and the events of the second movie. I guess I've just aged out of this demographic, but I simply don't get anything out of teen romances and boy beef in horror movies. Not to mention, Tyler is way too old to be so fucking stupid. I know Don Mancini didn't like the casting choice for him, and I share that annoyance. The only really unique character I enjoyed was Botnick, but he mostly assists the movie in a campy way. I didn't mind Justin Whalen, or any of the acting for that matter. It was mostly the script that felt lacking. The carnival ending was also so random and out of place. I understand wanting a change in scenery, but it was very low effort. I definitely enjoyed aspects of the movie though. Brad Dourif always does a great job, and the Chucky animatronic still looked great thanks to Kevin Yeager. And I might just be blanking on one right now, but I believe Botnick's death is the first time Chucky straight up kills someone with a blade without the assistance of an eyeball machine or a voodoo doll. And I like the idea of Andy taking over the Karen/Kyle role, now being the protector over Tyler, even though he isn't really the best at it. All in all, Child's Play 3 might not be everyone's least favorite Child's Play, but it's probably one of the least memorable. It has a ton of plot issues, forgettable characters, and is tonally all over the place. If you just want a few fun Chucky kills and one-liners, then you'll still have fun with it though. It took 7 whole years for Don Mancini to create another chapter in the series, which just so happens to be the first Chucky movie I ever watched as a kid, Bride of Chucky. Well, that's about it. Thanks for watching, and a big thank you to my patrons for helping me keep this channel going. If you enjoy my reviews, maybe consider joining. You'll get to request specific movies for me to review and participate in polls to decide future franchises I cover. As always, I'm Noah Hook, and thanks for watching Hamburgers and Horror. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching my review of Child's Play 3. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like and subscribe so you can keep up with all my Chucky content. And if you want to help support the channel further, check me out on Instagram and Patreon. Thanks, y'all.